So good afternoon to everyone and a very warm welcome to this afternoon's webinar. We're resuming the series of webinars on educational themes after a gap of more than a year and a half. So we're really happy to be back and really happy to see many people join us. Before we get into today's session, I'd like to invite Mr. Vishwanath Alluri, who is the Secretary of the Krishnamurti Foundation India, to say a few words about the background to these webinars. Vishwanath.
Thank you, Siddharth. Good afternoon and welcome to all those who are on screen and off screen. First of all, I must thank you, all of you for joining this webinar being conducted by the KFI schools in India. I just want to say a few words about this initiative of webinar by KFI schools. I think all of you, or most of you may be aware that there are 6 schools of Krishnamurti Foundation India in India. First one being Rishi Valley School, which was started in 1931. Rajghat Besant School, which was started in 1934. The school Chennai, that was started in 1973. The Valley School Bangalore, 1978. Sahyadri School in 1995. And the Pathashaala in 2010. So these are the 6 schools of KFI. Why we are doing this webinar is for one reason. You see, Krishnaji's time there was demand for many people outside India also to start similar schools. But Krishnaji had said it's not possible for the foundation to start so many schools. But it's good to nurture the interest of those people who wanted to start similar schools. So to share our understanding of education in the light of Krishnamurti teachings, we have decided to take 2 initiatives. One is role of a teacher, an online program for teacher education program, which is being conducted in every year now in 2 batches. That is one initiative. The second initiative is the webinar, which is being facilitated by the senior educators of all our schools. So this is the way of our sharing of our experience of education with all those who are interested in education. So this is the initiative of foundation and of all the schools. And we plan to host every 2 months one webinar. This is just for information. And the online course also, already applications are being accepted now. The next batch is starting in April. One can go to any website of any school. They can download the application or apply online. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Vishwanath. And now we'll get to today's webinar. It gives me great pleasure to introduce the facilitator of today's webinar, Mr. Ramesh Pathashaala. After a career in public sector banking, before which Ramesh already had a deep interest in Krishnamurti's thinking and had attended some of his talks, Ramesh joined the Rishi Valley School in 1995. And since then, for almost 30 years, he has worked very closely, especially with Rishi Valley School and currently the Sahyadri School near Pune, where he is the secretary. Ramesh is also a trustee of the Krishnamurti Foundation India and has very wide experience over these years in teaching in a variety of contexts, in facilitating life in residential schools, and also in editing the Journal of the Krishnamurti Schools, which is an annual publication. For today, Ramesh's subject is going to be the relationship between knowledge and understanding. The format will be that he will speak for perhaps around 45 minutes or so. And after that, we'll have about that much time for a question and answer session with him. If you would like to ask any questions, please do type your questions in the chat, which will be open to you soon. And we'll take the questions from there. So Ramesh, welcome, and it's all over to you now.
Thank you, Siddharth. Good afternoon to all the viewers, listeners. The subject for today has been engaging me for many years. It was set off in a way by a long essay from which I'll give you a couple of short extracts during the course of my talk. This is an intriguing thing because the subject, can knowledge and understanding go together, seems to be rather obvious. Obviously, they need to go together because knowledge has to be seen in many contexts, but without understanding, knowledge doesn't seem to have any existence of its own. And about understanding, there is no need to say anything. We need to understand everything that's happening to us, what is happening around us, all over the world, and so on. So that it doesn't seem to call for much pondering or debate or examination. But let's see how things do shape as we go along today. I have a few, naturally, I have a few quotes from Krishnamurti and also a few others that I hope will speak for me. I will, of course, be talking in between. So we'll start now and see how things go. Yeah. Yes. This is from Krishnamurti. The word is not the thing. When the word comes in between the observer and the observed, it distracts. Knowing that the word is not the thing and the description is not the described, I must go beyond the word. That seems to be a kind of challenge to us. If you're new to Krishnamurti's language and that is we are unfamiliar, then it looks very strange that he has to say that on the one hand, we seem to be saying that whoever said the word is the thing. Obviously, it's not the thing that it describes. But the problem with this issue is that very often in our lives, by mentioning something or repeating something, we seem to be giving the impression to all others that we are living that way. We have understood what we are saying in so many words. We have understood at its most profound level. All this seems to be implicit in the way we talk, we communicate with each other. Once we say something, it seems to be acting itself in real life, whereas it may not be so. We may have to ponder over this in the sense that the word is not the thing. Okay, then we must go beyond the word. So the basis of to go beyond is the word itself, or words, in some detail or in very little detail, and so on. So let's now go back to the title itself and examine these two terms. Knowledge first, and then we'll come to the next one. Knowledge itself, in the way Krishnamurti was dealing with it for over 50 years, he was trying to make it simple by saying that knowledge can be technological knowledge or psychological knowledge. So in technological knowledge, he includes everything that we do as a matter of course throughout our life. how to make our lives comfortable, how to educate young people, how to go about organizing the material world. So in everything, whether it's, as he used to say, the milkman and the postman, they are all part of this technological world in which we move all the time. There you need, if you bring it to the most basic thing, you need skill, you need to find out what are the things that are necessary to carry on in the most efficient manner. So competence, skill and competence in organizing things, whether it is laying a road or improving communication systems, building houses, setting up schools, hospitals, bringing skillful people to man these institutions, which are absolutely essential for the survival of man, and so on. There is no need to question that. There is absolute need for knowledge in its widest sense, that we should know what we are doing in any of these activities, and we need to be equipped with the necessary skills. If it is necessary to take an exam, learn the whole entire subject, we do that from early schooling to senior university levels. So that's obvious to us. In that, Krishnamurti says, and we don't see any objection to his use of one word for something that is impossibly detailed and necessary in our life. So all these activities that we organize for the more smooth functioning of the world, the material world in which we are part. So the technological side of that is taken for granted. We all agree on that. But the tricky thing is the other one. He puts the term psychological world. And he has also said about memory. We'll come to that a little later. What is it that constitutes psychological memory? Let's try to see whether we can get some light on that. I have a few lines from a famous long poem by T.S. Eliot, the 20th century poet, was American-British. There is, it seems to us, at best, only a limited value in the knowledge derived from experience. The knowledge imposes a pattern and falsifies, for the pattern is new in every moment. I deliberately chose this because it seems to almost mirror what Krishnamurti was saying for such a long time, so many times, in so many contexts. I'll read it again. There is, it seems to us, at best, only a limited value in the knowledge derived from experience. The knowledge imposes a pattern and falsifies, for the pattern is new in every moment. He not only says the pattern falsifies, and he gives the reason, because the pattern is new in every moment. So we see from there that it's not only Krishnamurti, but somebody else also seems to have seen the whole point of it. That what this would probably, I'm sure that you'll agree with me if I say this comes in the area of psychological memory, psychological world, where patterns. See, after all, if you think of a pattern in trying to design a bridge or laying a road and so on, patterns matter. The pattern may change from one location to another, but they all need pattern, design, a plan to go on with whatever they need to do, construction and so on. There, the patterns are necessary. In fact, if you go without anything in your mind as to how it has to turn out to be, how can you even start the process? So there, it's obvious. But on the other hand, in relationships, in thinking about and remembering things about our conversations with somebody else, from the closest relative to far away friends, distant people, strangers, and so on, memory repeated over and over again about how that person talked to me, how he behaved with others years ago, yesterday, and so on, seems to stay rather heavy on our heads, and they seem to make the difference in relationships. They are obviously a burden in relationship. That seems reasonable. So what do we do? How do we go about this? I mean, memory is memory. You can't simply say, don't come and don't enter this place and so on. There is nothing that you can do about memory. It comes on its own. Certain things we forget, certain things we would rather forget, keeps coming back to us, and so on. So let's see another thing that I'm now going back to get some help from a writer whom I used to whom I admire quite a lot for various reasons. He's a very interesting writer, profound writer. He has covered almost everything important in our lives. He's worth reading anytime. And it so happened that I got the theme of today's talk from this very extract. Knowledge is acquired when, sorry. Knowledge is acquired when we succeed in fitting a new experience into the system of concepts based upon our old experiences. We want to fit a new experience into the system of concepts based upon our old experiences. Understanding, on the other hand, comes when we liberate ourselves from the old and so make possible a direct, unmediated contact with the new, the mystery, moment by moment of our existence. It's a mouthful, so we may have to look at it 2-3 times. I leave it to you to do that. Then again, he comes back to both. What does that mean? The definition that I just read out, what does it mean? Knowledge is always in terms of concepts and can be passed on by means of words or other symbols. Understanding is not conceptual and therefore cannot be passed on. It's an immediate experience, and immediate experience can only be talked about very inadequately, never shared. What is in brackets is also from the original. So knowledge is always in terms of concepts and can be passed on by means of words or other symbols. Understanding is not conceptual and therefore cannot be passed on. It's an immediate experience. An immediate experience can only be talked about very inadequately, never shared. So here is the difficulty that that we all have to face all the time. We can all go on adding to our incrementally, and we do add to our knowledge of so many things. whether in our pet subject or favorite subjects, favorite area of reading or a place. So whatever we can add to our knowledge is something that we can always pass on. A skillful writer or a speaker can communicate so effectively, clearly to other people in many ways, especially by speech and writing. Okay, so that seems to be easy to understand. So what is we'll come to the drawbacks that knowledge may be giving us, but on the other hand, because of its inherent difficulty in communicating understanding, we are all trying to do that. We read something, we speak to somebody, we watch something, we travel somewhere. All our experiences, day-to-day experiences of all kinds. We do some work of physical work and so on, and we can talk about it endlessly to other people. That is, in many ways, substantially what we have learned by way of what is called knowledge. That is, adding to our experience, storing it, maybe organizing it very effectively so that when it is written down or spoken, somebody else may read. But the question is whether the immediate experience of myself, and every one of us in our daily life is something that is unique to us. Can we really convey it as effectively as we experience it? So that is the problem. So there is, I wouldn't call it dichotomy, but there is this puzzle as to how to bring them together so that whatever knowledge that we acquire for the benefit of ourselves and for all mankind, and ultimately for all life on earth, how is it to be communicated to other people in such a way that we can bring some good to the world and very, very carefully avoid doing any harm? That seems to be obviously one of the things that we would like to happen. These are platitudes. Nobody is going to, I'm sure that nobody is going to question that. Or we may also have some questions to ask. Let's see how these things figure out in the end. So that's the puzzle I have put in between. So in this, there is another difficulty that we come across when you read Krishnamurti. He says knowledge is very clear, adding, incremental, and there is no end to knowledge, and so on. Okay, so there is a clarity about what knowledge may be. We can include many other things, information, reports, this, that, and say that it is also part of knowledge. There may be differences. There may be differences in the quality of expression. There may be differences in the content itself. One may be too light-hearted or trivial, and others may be of more value. But knowledge is knowledge. In that, Krishnamurti says that when you think of understanding, he didn't use the word understanding very often. He talked about perception, looking. He says that talk about terminology of relating to knowledge in any way, that is verbal understanding. He used to use the word verbal understanding and intellectual understanding, and he was rather dismissive of that. I have a bone to pick with him in this. What I feel is that he too easily dismissed intellectual understanding, because the intellectual understanding seems to he took it as the exact equivalent of verbal understanding. Verbal, as we all know, relates to words. So verbal is literal meaning of the word or words that are being spoken or written. So that is verbal. To read or listen to and understand it in a certain way is the obvious first level understanding, right? After all, we all speak or write or show by symbols, signs, what we are trying to convey to the other person. So, but intellectual understanding he equated with verbal, and which is not quite correct. Because Krishnamurti himself was fond of going to the origin of words. He used to say, what is the etymological meaning? He used the word intelligence rather appreciatively, I would say. Because he said intelligence is the faculty. He didn't say faculty, but intelligence is the one that looks at the world, understands the world, perceives the world and the word. Not only the world, but the word. So, again, something about what is being experienced, what is being spoken about the experience, what is being written about, and so on. In that, he pointed out that intelligence comes from the Latin word intellegere, which literally means between the lines. He used to say, can we read, when somebody is saying something, can we read between the lines? Which means go to the very root of what that person is saying and understand it completely, totally with all your senses. That for Krishnamurti was complete understanding. He used the word total and very often. I have no issues with that. It looks to me very, it's not as though I am sitting as an authority and interpreting him. I'm sorry if I gave that feeling to you. But the point is that we need to deal with words and what they may mean to us. Intellectual, not surprisingly, comes from the same root. And apparently it means this. I'll just read out to you. Intellectual understanding in the deep sense of the word is to be able to read between the lines, as I said. Intellectual understanding is also, in its deepest sense, not just verbal, but not just the words, that is, but to go to the root of that and explore what they may mean. So, in that sense, intellectual understanding has to be it has to mean much more than what Krishnamurti gave credit for. It's not quite the same as verbal. It's not the literal meaning of the words strung together and understood in a certain way. That may be useful for very simple things. But if you want to understand something very, very vital to our lives, then we need to pause and examine examine the whole issue. That's the function of the intellectual, and that is intellectual understanding. It's not that an intellectual is a different class. The act of exploring something to its roots is for all of us. There is no, whether we are literates, semi-literates, or illiterates, and whatever, you can't read, write. All of us think, all of us communicate, all of us try to understand. So that intellectual understanding is something for all of us. The more important thing for us to understand from Krishnamurti, I'll be showing a few other quotes from him, which I hope you'll be able to get more from them. Is the I will say what I have to say first, and then we will go to those extracts. In the matter of understanding, the most important contribution that Krishnamurti has brought, in my view, is the fact that the past does not impinge on our present understanding. That's a tall order, and it's the most difficult thing for us in our lives. However long we live, it's something we have to wrestle with every minute of our lives. How can we ever go to the next minute with all the psychological baggage, the knowledge, the prejudices, the impressions, the opinions, the facts of past experience, all that being constantly shed and going into the next minute with a fresh mind, with an innocent mind. That's something that's the biggest challenge in our lives. If at all we want to do it, it's something that we need to be doing every minute of our lives, and it's going to be a lifelong exercise. So he showed us in 100 million different ways, really, how we go about living our lives with taking and carrying and adding to our psychological baggage all the time, burdening ourselves, never going back and looking at the fact that it's that very baggage that is causing lots of problems in our relationships. And for Krishnamurti, as it is for many other great thinkers, life is relationship, whether you like it or not. We need to constantly experience the beauty, the pleasure, the joy of relationship, but also the pain that it brings, the sorrow that it brings. So relationship is everything. You have to relate to other people, to the people closest to you, and a little far, and then to humanity as a whole, and all life as a whole, and the inanimate things in the world. Because, as he said, to be is to be related. So let's see how any more things that we could see in this presentation. This is again Huxley summarizing what Krishnamurti says. Factual memory, the memory, for example, of the best way of making sulfuric acid or of catching up accounts, is an unmixed blessing. We need it all the time. To make a living, we need to get a job, work in some area in the world where we have some skill to show and perform. Whether to make sulfuric acid in the laboratory or of catching up accounts, is an unmixed blessing. But psychological memory, to use Krishnamurti's term, memory carrying an emotional charge, whether positive or negative, is a source at the worst of neurosis and insanity. He puts it very strongly. It's a very profound collection of essays called Tomorrow and Tomorrow and Tomorrow. The line taken from Macbeth, which Huxley uses in this book of essays. This is from the first piece, I think. Okay, yeah. So this is again Krishnamurti talking. There must be knowledge, because otherwise I can't speak English or any other language for that matter. I can't drive a car. I wouldn't know where to go. So knowledge is essential to function, to go to a factory, to write a letter, anything. Knowledge is necessary. And as long as the mind lives, see, now the danger is pointed out. And as long as the mind lives within that area, it lives in a prison. because knowledge, I have to equip myself with more and more and more. So if we put ourselves in that prison, it can decorate the prison, which we are doing. Better bathrooms, better toilets, better cars, better this and better that, better. You know, the better is the enemy of the good. He spoke this 50 years ago, and it probably means much more now than ever. So now the benefits that the known brings to us, and the curse also. Can the mind be free from the known? Let's see how important the known is. If it sees this, then in the field of the known, the activity of the me does not enter. You see the difference? Have I conveyed it to you? If I see the importance of knowledge and its value, its significance, its necessity. See, up to now, he is very clear. He accepts that knowledge is absolutely necessary in 100 different ways in our daily life. If I see the importance of knowledge and its value, its significance, its necessity, then the me, which has created such great mischief in the world, that me has no place in knowledge. It can't identify itself with knowledge, because knowledge is pure function. But when function becomes status, then it is the operation of the me. So this is exactly what happens in our daily life. When the more knowledgeable you are, the more fame you have got because you're knowledgeable in a particular area, or you're skillful, or you have a certain effective function to perform in society. You get the status. Whereas all that knowledge that you have acquired, for which you have been given a role, is to perform the function and not to assume status. But why does it always, almost inevitably, it becomes the me? I have done this. I am so and so. We keep repeating in different ways. This may be very subtle, and I may, if I do it, I may not be aware of it. It is for the others to point out to me. So in that respect, particularly in this respect, relationship becomes important. Because I find it very difficult to see that I have these flaws, 1, 2, 3, 4, whatever they are. In relationship, they come into view. And if I can't learn from what I have experienced in one or more relationship, then the other person tells me in so many ways. He or she may be insulting, or may be gentle in pointing out, or talk about this to somebody else, which is what is happening all the time in our world. So this is a very powerful piece. Okay, now again, look what happens. The first line, sorry, this is a long quote, so I need to look what happens. Experience now.
Ramesh, you're muted.
Sorry, I'll repeat. Look what happens. Experience, knowledge, thought, and action. Right? Have you got that? I have an experience. And from that experience, I gather a great deal of knowledge. Then I think how to put that knowledge into action. So experience, knowledge, memory, then thought, then action. From that action, you learn more, right? All that is the process of knowledge, thought, and action. That's clear. That's clear. You have learned in the school. If you have a great deal of information as knowledge about engineering, you go to college, there you learn to you learn more about engineering, mathematics, pressure, and so on. Then you go to university. There you're also getting more and more knowledge. And then you get a job, if you are lucky. He's speaking in India to students in Rishi Valley. So then you get a job, if you are lucky. Then you operate skillfully or not skillfully according to the knowledge that you have acquired. Right? Is that clear? Have you understood that? He is asking the children, showing them that this is what happens endlessly from now onwards when you are in the junior classes to senior classes to college, to university, and so on, and to a job. Have you understood that? He says, okay. Now, we'll come back. What is it that seems to come into play? After all, we are not automatons. We are not machines. Not just it. It may take some more time for us to probably be made into machines. So we have minds, we have brains. We can understand many things that are going on. Open our eyes to whatever is happening around the world. We feel that we are not manipulated the way in which some people speak about human beings being manipulated. We are being manipulated, but we can understand that we are trying to be made into automatons in one way or the other, and so on. It's not as though it's inevitable that from school to university to a job and so on, things happen like clockwork. There are so many things that come in between in our daily life, joys and sorrows, and we learn. We may not learn to be wise all the time, but we do manage to be sensible most of the time. So it's not as though it's as dire and dark as Krishnamurti seems to be saying. But the fact is, as many people who talk to him one-to-one in interviews and also in bigger groups, in question answer sessions, they used to say that, Mr. Krishnamurti, you're talking nicely about the possible experiences and possible things that the normal human beings like us are unable to experience. You're talking about something extraordinary that is idealistic, impractical. You're asking us to completely shed the past, forget the past, unburden completely. It's not possible for us. We are ordinary mortals. We have to be practical. That practical thing used to come often in interviews. But he used to smile, at least it's on record, in his own record. He used to ask them, so sending your boys to fight in a faraway war for reasons they may not even fully understand, and making them kill other young men like that and getting maimed in the process and come back shell-shocked and living a neurotic life for the rest of their life, 50 years, 60 years afterwards. That you call practical, sending them to be killed and to kill. Both are abominations. It's an abomination, a sin. If at all there is a sin in this world, you would say that. To exploit other people and to kill at all, anything at all, especially human beings, obviously. So in that sense, what is practical? So why don't you examine what I'm saying? It's for you to sort it out. I am not asking you to do this. I'm saying that this is what happens in all our lives. So do you really want to go on living like this to the end of your life? Don't you want to change? Don't you want a basic fundamental transformation in your life? These were the questions he was asking. which is to come back to, these are all the various threads that help in understanding ourselves, understanding others, and understanding what we call theoretical knowledge, practical knowledge, knowledge which requires, which teaches us skills to carry on in this world, knowledge which makes us, which tries to explain the world. That's the work of the philosophers. Whatever it is, the past is all the time operating, and when the past is operating, then you are not thinking. You are being led, directed one way or the other. It depends upon your own experience, your own reading, your own listening, your own understanding of that, which is you gradually become second-hand human beings. That's the danger he was repeatedly pointing out. So what comes in the way of understanding? So that's another thing to keep in mind. Let's go back. Okay, now knowledge will not lead to intelligence. We accumulate a great deal of knowledge about many things, but to act intelligently about what one has learned seems almost impossible. Schools and colleges and universities cultivate knowledge about our behavior, about the universe, about science and every form of technology. But these centers of education rarely help a human being to live a daily life of excellence. What is the function of an educational institution? Is it merely to impart some information and test them at the end of the year and be done with it? No. Scholars maintain that human beings can evolve only through vast accumulations of information and knowledge. Humanity has lived through thousands and thousands of wars, has accumulated a great deal of knowledge on how to kill, yet that very knowledge is preventing us from putting an end to all wars. We accept war as a way of life and all the brutalities, violence, and killing as the normal course of our life. We know we should not kill another. This knowing is totally unrelated to the fact of killing. Knowledge does not prevent our killing animals and destroying the earth. Knowledge cannot function through intelligence, but intelligence can function with knowledge. To know is not to know. The understanding of the fact that knowledge can never solve our human problems is intelligence. The whole movement of life is learning. The book from which this is taken was the book compiled of his letters to teachers of the Krishnamurti Foundation schools. So he was exhorting teachers to examine this. It's all right to go and teach physics or mathematics or history, but what do you teach along with that? That's much more important. So that is that. I'll take just 5 more minutes, and then maybe we can stop. Understanding implies. See, this is one of the rare instances where he actually uses defines understanding. Understanding implies, does it not, a mind or a brain? The whole structure of the mind listens not only to the word, but goes beyond the word and sees the deep meaning of that particular statement. And then there is an insight. Then you say, I understand it. I have got it. So insight implies a mind that is quiet, willing to listen, go beyond the word, and observe the truth of something, almost anything that is. And in talking about meditation, he would, as many of you would know, who have read him, he would dismiss repetition of any word or mantra or sitting in front of an image and closing your eyes and repeating some word is not meditation. Meditation is all this, examining every minute of our lives, our motives, and so on in relationship. So meditation is the understanding of knowledge. The knowledge is about other people and things, about everything. And the next one is, what is important is not the duration of attention, but understanding and observing inattention. When the mind, the brain, is aware of how inattentive it is, that very awareness of inattention becomes attention. So another main strand of Krishnamurti's teaching is that when we posit something, the danger, he was pointing out the dangers of conceptual understanding. It is how harmful it is in the psychological world, how harmful it is. Because, for instance, one of the terms he would examine closely and point out is, you take non-violence. He was very sharp in criticism of that, but he said, you're merely positing a state in which there is no violence and you're calling it non-violence. But he said, non-violence is not a fact. Violence is the fact. In the same way, in the last extract, that quote which I read, he's talking about look at inattention. Don't talk about, I want to be attentive, I will be attentive. What should I do to be attentive? But on the other hand, it helps us to look at the fact of inattention, and much more concretely, the fact of violence. I see violence before me. I see violence in my word, my gesture, my relationship with somebody else. It's for me to pause and look at this thing called violence. Have I been violent in my gestures, in my speech? In which case, something inside me has made me do that. What is it that is happening inside me? I am hurt by something somebody said or did, and I am hurt by that. So I react. I immediately hit back. I become violent in speech. This happens to all of us most of the time. And in physical violence, which is terrible, wars are going on right now. So, what is helpful in this is to forget the question of ideals. He was quite critical of ideals. Ideally, you are positing, you are actually inventing it. It is not a fact. It's a fantasy. You're saying the ideal world in which everybody lives in harmony. You write a book about that. It's all fine for reading, but then you're merely hoping for that world to come into being. But what is happening now is this: violence, problems in relationship, waste of resources, destruction of the environment, and so on. So why don't you see that and see if you can stop doing what you're doing in the destruction of humanity, the killing of people, killing of animals for profit, and destroying the countryside and so on. Instead of looking at that, you talk about that and come out with plans, with grand ideals and create some kind of a theoretical world in which these things will not exist. That doesn't help. It does not help. Many people have written wonderful utopias, but nothing has happened because we are what we are. See, this is a very famous quote from the English poet and mystic who lived in the late 18th and early 19th century, William Blake. If the doors of perception were cleansed, everything would appear to man as it is, infinite. For man has closed himself up till he sees all things through narrow chinks of his cavern, very small holes, chinks of his cavern. It's a very narrow way into the outside world. The last one. No. One more. No. Yeah, this is the one. We always look at. I'll. We always look at things partially. Firstly, because we are inattentive, and secondly, because we look at things from prejudices, from verbal and psychological images about what we see. So we never see anything completely. Our perception is not only with the eyes, with the senses, but also with the mind. And obviously, the mind is heavily conditioned. So, intellectual perception is only partial perception. Yet perceiving with the intellect seems to satisfy most of us, and we think we understand. A fragmentary understanding is the most dangerous and destructive thing. That is exactly what is happening all over the world. The politician, the priest, the businessman, the technician, even the artist, all of them see only partially. And therefore, they are really very destructive people. As they play a great part in the world, their partial perception becomes the accepted norm. And man is caught in this. Each of us is at the same time the priest, the politician, the businessman, the artist, and many other fragmentary entities. This calls for a lot of pondering over. It's dense, but he is himself summing up his case. I would end with another poem from Eliot. The endless cycle of idea and action, endless invention, endless experiment, brings knowledge of motion, but not of stillness, knowledge of speech, but not of silence, knowledge of words and ignorance of the word in capitals. He was a Christian, but the word is the word of God. Ignorance of the word, what is really vital to a Christian, that is the meaning he gives to it. But ignorance of the word, that is the deepest meaning of any word, that anything that we say. All our knowledge brings us nearer to our ignorance. This line, all our knowledge brings us nearer to our ignorance, goes with Krishnamurti saying that knowledge always moves in the shadow of ignorance. And finally, where is the wisdom we have lost in knowledge? Where is the knowledge we have lost in information? So in this today's world of information overload, where everything is measured in terms of money, finance, economy. In fact, we even call this thing the knowledge economy, and so on. This is a question to ask. So I don't have much to say because I seem to have taken a lot of some extra time. So to the extent I can, I'll try to respond to questions. Siddharth, please. Thank you, Siddharth.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Ramesh. That was such an engaging and comprehensive uh, exploration of knowledge, information, intelligence, wisdom. There are several questions which have come into the chat. So without saying anything further, I'd like to get straight to the questions. So here I'm just reading out one question. So here it is. Person A depends on concepts and knowledge for navigating through everything, including relationships, nature, circumstances, and technology. Thus, he always operates mechanically without any spark of new understanding. His friend, person B, has made concepts of person A and operates with that fixed background with him successfully, as there never is any newness in A's behavior. What is wrong with this approach?
There is always a danger. It's like a scientist doing an experiment in controlled conditions. If you already posit that in a certain particular relationship, uh, somebody operates with full knowledge or great deal of knowledge about the other person, about the intermediary information that he has gained over the years, and so on. If I understand the question, then within that limited world in which he seems to operate successfully, means so far there has been no misunderstanding, there has been friendship and understanding of a kind, and so on. Fine, if both of them seem comfortable with that, which is the case with all of us in particular relationships, that we don't cross the border. If I say this to him, he will be hurt, so I will not say that. Naturally, I will restrain myself. I'll control myself. It will become part of my relation, our relationship. The same thing happens with the other person or persons. So in that case, there's no problem. Uh, we carry on. That's how. That seems to be all right. But do we really want to continue to live that way? Because sooner or later something will happen to question, for us to question this. That would be my response.
Thank you. Thank you, Ramesh. Next question here is, would you say that wisdom is a synonym or a superset of understanding? And where do understanding and intelligence sit vis-a-vis each other? I want to make sure I understand these distinctions well. So that is wisdom, understanding, and intelligence.
I'm not a specialist in this. The use of precise use of these terms, but I would say that they are all in the sense in which I understand, they are all the same. Intelligence is the thing operating in an impersonal sense. Intelligence is the one operating, and the other two are not really essentially different from intelligence. So I'm not able to. I mean, it's not as though I can see any difference. I myself am not able. They are fine. Taken together, they are as good as anything that uh, one can wish for in by way of using terms. The terminology part of it, I'm comfortable with all of them in that sense. They're more or less the same.
Right, thank you. I have a kind of follow-up question to this, Ramesh, which is, in one of your quotes, there was a statement that knowledge does not lead to intelligence. So the question I have is, then what does lead to intelligence?
to the extent that any piece of knowledge or any bank or store of knowledge is first thing is it is limited. So using it as a tool or as a path to understand is hazardous. They may be useful as has been repeated so many. They are useful in one vast area in which we live most of our lives, but also concurrently we also live a great deal of our lives in the other area where relationships matter. There it seems to be a stumbling block. One way or the other, any breakdown in relationship can be attributed to some part of our store of knowledge about other person or persons operating consciously or unconsciously. And in that sense, I would say that it doesn't lead to understanding. But understanding, looking back in a sense, not in a chronological sense, but looking at knowledge, the wisdom, the intelligence that can use that knowledge in its own area properly and keep it away from the other area where it seems to be an issue. It's not possible for us to forget and say that I don't know who my wife is or husband is or children are or friends are and others, obviously. So memory of that kind is again essential. But in relationship, we allow many other things to enter. I'm willing to admit that most of it is unconscious. Therein lies the danger. We don't know that the past is operating, knowledge is operating. So that's it, I think.
In fact, there's a related question that has come just now, which is, do you think we have to start first from the intellectual perception, even though we know it is partial, in order to attain wisdom, or in other words, to awaken intelligence? So do we have to first start from intellectual perception, despite its limitations, in order to attain wisdom?
See, this is something about which I'm not equipped to answer because I'm very much like anybody else. Absolutely. And I'm not saying this out of any sense of humility, but it's a fact. So I'm as much, I wouldn't say in the dark because I don't think the questioner is in the dark. It's a very useful way of entering the whole issue. Intellectual understanding is essential because I need to understand what somebody is talking about, what he may mean by what he says or does. That's one level. But at the same time, the much more difficult thing is to bring my other senses into operation and keep my knowledge of the whole thing in abeyance while I try to understand what the whole thing is. It's a question of exploration, examination, and so on. I'm not stalling the whole, I'm not stalling. In this process, we should be careful that we don't say that I'm not in that state which Krishnamurti is talking about, so I'm never going to make it. So I'll have to stay here and make efficient use of this. We have to struggle in all areas at the same time. So, and in fact, Huxley uses this term, man is an amphibian. He lives in two worlds at the same time. The world of the physical world and the world of the mind, which includes the spiritual world. So, and you can't get out of either of them. You're willy-nilly, you're a prisoner of both. So it's for you to realize that this is what your predicament is and try to understand the state of your being. I'm just giving another.
Right. In fact, to add one more factor to the mix, here's a question which brings in the issue of emotion. The question is, does Krishnaji talk about the emotional perception of and reaction to an observable event? I'll just repeat the question because there are a couple of parentheses which I left out the first time. Does Krishnaji talk about the emotional perception of and reaction to, that is an individual experience but not intellectual, to an observable event, a factum of knowledge? So emotions, what role do they play?
He certainly talks about emotions. And he also points out the dangers of, he doesn't say succumbing, but then giving in to emotions, because emotion can be very destructive. Emotions come spontaneously, which is a very dangerous thing, because it can come out of the past, it can come out of an immediate provocation, which may lie somewhere in the past or much more immediate, and you may say or do something which breaks relationship down, breaks up relationships and so on. So behind the emotion, is it possible to watch the emotions that have happened to you or to the other person, and you're watching that? So emotion have value or not value, or everything has value in the sense that you can observe and learn. Learning was something that he was constantly talking about. You can learn from, you not only you have to learn from everything and everywhere, and not through books alone, because they are limited, through watching something alone, but to wonder, to ponder over, but always step back, step back. That was something that he was saying in his own language. So emotions, it's dangerous to identify ourselves and say that they may be useful. I don't know. I also am wary of that.
Okay, now here's one more question about knowledge. Knowledge is always limited. Can you please throw some light on this? I suppose the question is implicitly about what we are calling the psychological world.
You mean the limitation of psychological knowledge?
Well, I don't really know. Maybe I should just repeat the question as is. Knowledge is always limited. Can you please throw some light on this?
Okay. Certainly, if you talk about scientific knowledge, let's look at different kinds of knowledge possible. Scientific knowledge, is discoveries going on and on and on endlessly. And some discoveries have been refuted, others have been validated, but still we go on, not we, the scientists go on endlessly doing research, wondering what is the cause of this. A new thing comes into being, a new infection, pandemic, and so on. And they go into the great lengths to see what is behind that. In theoretical physics, in mathematics, in all areas of science, it's an endless endeavor. That looks obvious. It's some scientists in the past, but not in recent years, thankfully, have said that science has discovered, and all that remains to be discovered, there's nothing left. And after that, almost all the important discoveries in science have happened in the last 100 years. So that's one part. And the others in the technological world, purely designs, construction, systems of education, how to remember things usefully so that you can use them in this area or the other area and so on. And endless number of self-help books saying that 47 different ways you can understand other people, or to success, this, that, and so on. So everybody thinks that he or she is giving a new twist to the whole problem, issue of this or that, the economy, financial management, political philosophies, practices, and so on and on and on. There is no end to that. There doesn't seem to be any end to it. Because when somebody says this is the end, somebody else says, no, there is this to be seen. What is the solution to this, and so on. Even mathematical problems have not been solved. Somebody puts in a problem and somebody else is unable, nobody is able to solve for hundreds of years. So That's one. These are two areas. But in the psychological side, it is even more obvious to me, and I'm sure it is to everyone, that have we really understood each other at all? Man has been, I'm just repeating what Krishnamurti says, which is a fact. It's not because Krishnamurti says it, but he only points out the fact, observable facts. Thousands and thousands of years we have been around in this world. We have struggled but survived for so many years, and we have improved so many areas in human living. Human longevity has improved, health. In the area of health, there has been tremendous improvement, and in so many other things, hygiene and this, that, transport, communication. But we are nowhere nearer now than 100 years ago when the First World War took place, to avoid war. That war was called the war to end all wars. And the catastrophe started after that war ended. So much worse war happened immediately after that, within 20 years. And it has not stopped. And when we talk about wars, for instance, just that one thing, all these senior political leaders who are in power all over the world, they only talk about how to fix this particular thing, how to make these people withdraw from this particular area. We are so limited even in our vision. We don't even say, why don't we just get rid of the whole thing in this small tiny corner of an area in the westernmost part of Asia. You're having this for 50, 60, 70 years. Same thing in India and in so many other places. Little wars and famine. There's plenty of food in one place, there is famine in another area. So we seem to be talking endlessly about it, but this is perpetuated. Misunderstanding other people, abusing them, harassing them, exploiting them. And language has been completely devalued. I wanted to say this, but there was no context, but I'm just using this as a context. Just look at how debased language has become. When recently, just the last month, two things happened within a week. Right now, right here in India, the T-shirt of a retired cricketer was announced as being retired by the cricket board. The T-shirt of this person, a very good player who played for a long time for India and the cricket team, led India, a fine cricketer, there is no doubt. There was no mention of him. There was mention of his T-shirt, and the T-shirt was retired. The person has already retired years ago. That's one side. The other thing is, for the same week, there was this IPL auctioning in which living players who have their own parents, their own spouses, in some cases children, friends, and they're living people in their 20s and 30s, they were bought and sold. A T-shirt is retired and a player is bought and sold. We use language in such thoughtless words. It's an insult to the player to be bought and sold. Can't they use at least some other word for it? I'm sorry, this I felt in, and is one example of how even language has become a problem.
See, this debasement of language and the fact that no war ends wars, they just perpetuate further wars, leads me to one concern which underlies these webinars, and which in fact one of the attendees has asked. The question is, in what way is this subject related to education? So somewhere here we are also looking implicitly at the failure of education. So the question I'd like to ask you is, this relationship between knowledge and understanding, how does that play out in our work as educators? What role does it have there? How do we communicate it to students and so on?
See, there is this very popular term on which hundreds of books have been written, especially in recent years, critical thinking. So there are techniques given, and some of them are useful. Well, there's no doubt about that. But this is one of the things that we in the Krishnamurti school are struggling and constantly going back to in our relationship with children. See, we want their physical welfare, mental health to be sound, and we also give them a very sound introduction to the syllabus, the curriculum that is set for them in various, when they sit for their grade 10 or grade 12 examination. All that is going on. But in addition to that, we raise, and we need to keep doing this in our schools, the questions that Krishnamurti raised when he was visiting the schools. And you were, I know that you were both the student and later teacher in the Krishnamurti schools. He was asking these questions even of the younger lot. So it's not as though it is a question only for adults, all these things. And how do we help the children? Yes, there's so much of conflict going on all around the world and right in front of us all the time. So can we help the children not to move away from that? Because the natural tendency of children, as also of adults, is to escape. It's too much for me. The world is too much with us, we say, no. So it's too much for us. And so we try to move away, entertainment, endless entertainment, comfort, and moving away from facing the problem. It's good to have entertainment, to do many things which are there around us. It's for us to make use of them. But entertainment, as it is now being sold in every possible way, is seriously impairing the minds of young children. And COVID has exacerbated that to a great extent, because all that remained for them was looking at the screen, whether they were watching a movie or a cricket match or their own teacher talking to them. It all became this virtually two-dimensional. So we are just now coming out of it. So we need to engage with the children and point out to them that this is what is happening. And ask not only questions of their teachers, but when they go back home, to engage with the parents and other elders in the family and ask them these questions, and then educate themselves, but also maybe in the process educate the adults, both at school and at home. There is no alternative to that. We need to keep on doing this. And not go with the flow. This is the very dangerous thing. To simply say go with the flow. The flow may be leading us down a deep ravine. So that's it.
Absolutely. Couldn't agree with you more. We have time for perhaps another couple of questions. So here's one which perhaps you have already answered implicitly, but I'll ask it anyway. If knowledge, both technological and psychological, serves the purpose of providing heuristic methods of navigating the world, would it be right to dismiss this crutch? I'm wondering at how we would navigate the world in the absence of this limited crutch.
See, in its own area, technological memory is very useful. It's more than a crutch. It's an essential part of the normal scheme of things there. In the psychological, if you are constantly, I'm giving you a theoretical question. If I say something, it doesn't mean that I have solved it for eternity for myself. Certainly not. But it seems to be that we need to constantly be on the watch for our responses, in our relationship. Am I carrying something with me? I may feel comfortable, as was an earlier question mentioning. I may be comfortable in a certain relationship, but I must be aware that it is still a limited. It's only in a limited context, and it's like being in a box. It's a controlled situation, as I said. So in that respect, it's fine. but that vigilance is necessary, especially, but actually it's necessary everywhere, but particularly in this, where my own prejudice without my knowing it will come into play. So eternal vigilance, as they say.
Absolutely. Perhaps just one more question, or maybe two, we'll see. This one is, and this is a question which I have certainly a deep personal interest in, because I like to refer to other writers, thinkers, artists, and so on when exploring Krishnamurti's work as well. The question is, why do we refer to Blake, Eliot, Huxley? Do we need other observations to understand Krishnamurti?
No, absolutely not. We don't need. It's not to support my case that I brought them, because I have committed the sin of having read them at some time in the past, and I used to be in my very early years, late teens and all. These were very impressive writers and poets who may have unconsciously influenced me to talk about serious questions. I may have, in fact, I came to Krishnamurti. It's a personal answer. When Huxley uses psychological memory, and within brackets, in Krishnamurti's words, those are the very words, very extract which took me to Krishnamurti. I was not even aware of it. This, it's a very common South Indian name, and I didn't even know who he was. I was 18 years at that time, and I just went to the library and asked for the book, and then they gave me a Krishnamurti book. So in that respect, so in that, what I would remark is the other writers who were, except for Blake, who lived 100 years earlier to these people, these were almost exact contemporaries of Krishnamurti, both Huxley and Eliot. Born in the late 19th and lived most of at least 2/3 of the 20th century. They saw all what they saw, and this was their insight. And it looked so uncannily like Krishnamurti's language. Huxley was a friend, very close friend of Krishnamurti, so it was natural that he influenced him, and he must have been influenced in terminology, language, and ways of looking. So in that respect, I brought it because it's something. It's a happy coincidence, I would say.
Right. There's also, maybe this will be absolutely the last question, and it's a question. Sorry, I'm just relocating the question. Just a minute. Okay, the question is about why teachers in the Krishnamurti schools or alternative schools generally leave these schools in a very short time, even though they are concerned with, they are aware of, human beings, basic human questions, intelligence, and so on. But why is it that teachers leave in a very short time? That's the question.
Having been part of two schools and still continuing, I'll first talk about the schools themselves from the school's point of view. Then we'll come to the teacher side. From the school point of view, I would say that one of the main reasons may be that we have not been functioning as we should be in our daily life, in managing the schools, examining issues and meeting the issues, addressing the important issues, solving them. In the eyes of the teacher, this is inadequate. So, as I see it, I would say, being part of a school, I would say I need to do much more to bring the teacher concerned and the teachers concerned closer and closer into the fold, so that we can work together. Working together was so important, is so important, that speaking on behalf of almost any of our schools, We are always sorry to see any teacher go, even for purely personal domestic reasons. And on the so we need to continue to do much more in our schools, and the relationship between the older and the more senior people in the school and the newcomer will need to be closer than it is. So with that, it is possible to have more and more youngsters stay on for longer periods of time. On the other hand, looking at it from the teacher's side, I can see most of the reasons will be domestic. There may be reasons for the personal career oriented things, like they would like to do, if they're undergraduates, they might like to do post graduation and so on, or go on to do research, PhD and so on. And continuing with that kind of thing, personal pressures from the family, saying that all said and done, however much we try to improve the lot of our teachers by way of what is called compensation. I don't know why it's called compensation. It's a salary. Whatever it is, it's quite modest. So the qualifications that most youngsters have can fetch them a better job in a financial sense. For that reason, they will go, and they need to go and earn some money, and before they seriously think of coming back, maybe after 8 years, 10 years, 15 years, we welcome them back. Other things may be that they are not satisfied with certain things that have been happening in the school. They may think that you talk so much of Krishnamurti and you talk so much of relationship, but I don't see that happening in your actions or in the school. It's not being played out in a sense in which I feel like joining and continue to participate. I'm not happy with this. So I will withdraw and then find my own way. There will be other reasons, purely domestic. It's person oriented. Offhand, I can think of this.
Right. Thank you. Thank you so much, Ramesh. Thank you once again for such a lucid and comprehensive presentation, and for responding with such patience to so many questions. I'd also like to thank all the people who've attended this session, and my apologies that we couldn't take up every single question, really for reasons of time, so I had to choose. But I do hope you will join our future webinars as well, which will take place approximately every 2 months. And before we leave, I would just like to share one piece of information with you which may be of interest, which is that the KFI has recently launched an app called Awakening of Intelligence, which is available for download, for free download, on both Google Play as well as the App Store for Apple phones. And this app serves as a kind of introduction to key aspects of Krishnaji's thinking. And it has a very efficient, I would say, search function by which you can type in questions or themes that you might want to know what Krishnaji said, and they lead you to Krishnaji's thoughts through a variety of media, through the written word, as well as audio and video and so on. So the app is called The Awakening of Intelligence, and do feel free to download it if you wish to. So thank you very much once again, and look forward to seeing you in March for the next webinar. Thank you, Ramesh.
Thank you, Siddharth. Thank you very much. And I thank all the viewers, listeners for patiently sitting through this session. Hoping to see you sometime. Thank you.